G'day guys, just a quick video on Novavax. I wasn't expecting to make this video, but there's a lot of shenanigans out there, people making up all sorts of strange stories or whatever. I didn't expect it to happen, but it has, so I have to deal with it. So let's get on with it. Okay. So Gardenia in Bloom, she asked me a question. Harry, what are your thoughts on the prefusion spike protein in Novavax? It's not only used in Novavax, but anyway, there's a patent out for it, and it's an amino acid based system, but I'll explain it shortly. Obviously, I've started to put a comment. I haven't completed it because I'm actually going to put in this video so she's aware of it. Now, this is basically the recent information coming out of Novavax in terms of what their results have currently been. So they're in, the sort of phase 3 trial, which isn't too far away from finishing, thankfully. That will be sorted out quite quickly, and we'll be able to get access to this much way safer vaccine compared to the other ones. Now, Novavax COVID-19 vaccine demonstrates 90% overall efficacy and 100% protection against moderate and severe disease in Prevent-19 phase 3 trial. So that was what the study was called, basically. So we didn't have any losses in that trial. We did in the placebo, but not in the people in the intervention. So pretty good results. So to be expected, like any vaccine that is done in the traditional way will work. The difference is this is done in the traditional way to a large extent. There's a few slight variations to the traditional way. Most traditional vaccines, as you know, they've been made as deactivated. They used to be done in like eggs or certain in vitro cells in more recent times. But in general, they were basically produced in different sort of vats and mixers and stuff like that. And they were either two types. They were either completely deactivated virus, or they were basically, because of the structure of the virus, you had to basically express, that means the virus had to basically produce the component, those sort of viral particles that were able to penetrate. So you had to, some viruses had to be slightly, functional still in order to basically be able to produce the components that infect cells, and then because they work slightly different, a few viruses, so they had to be made slightly alive, but deactivated in general terms. So they would just allow them to generate those proteins that are used for replication in order to get the body to respond and create an autoimmunity. But that's generally what has gone in the past. The flu vax, a lot of them were done in eggs. There are some variations now that are done in cells and stuff like that, in petri dish type things. This is this approach, and this Novavax uses that approach. So what they do is they basically use, well, I'll actually go to the website and we'll just take a look quickly. So we'll accept that. So basically, I'll explain that in a short while about the particles, but I'll just move through here for a sec in that regards. So what they're using is a sort of a matrix they use a similar matrix to sort of basically purify things as well, but they also use it for other purposes as well. So we'll get into that shortly. So it actually is very similar to the AstraZeneca in a sense, but we don't infect humans like with AstraZeneca. We infect cell cultures which come from moths. So we've got cells from moths. We basically infect them. We produce the spikes, these deactivated spikes. And then what we do is we collect the spikes and then purify and get rid of everything else. And we've only got the spikes. Once we've got the spikes, proteins, so that is very much like the traditional one, you do it in the egg and produce the viral proteins. Well, here we're just producing the spikes. We're not producing all the actual virus itself or the actual proteins, because many cases, they're not necessary. It's really the spike protein that you want the immune system to detect, because that's what latches onto the receptor, which is the ACE2 receptor, as we know. Now, the way it actually, what they've done is once they get all these spikes, then they actually, right in the middle here, these are all the spikes, okay, they've collected. Right in the middle there is a nanoparticle, which is a lipid-based nanoparticle. So it's basically a fat-based nanoparticle, okay? So it's a small nanoparticle of lipid, of fat, which basically they glue all these protein spikes on there. So what they're doing is they're actually providing a plethora of spikes for the immune system to pick up on. So they're trying to make it into a big sort of structure that basically the immune system will respond much more favorably towards. If you've got just small spikes that can degrade and stuff like that, and you may not give the immune system enough time to basically pick them up. That's why the other companies went with the other approach. But there are a whole lot of autoimmune risks with the other approaches and other issues, which we've talked about no end. And there's a lot of literature showing increase in clotting factors with these sort of AstraZeneca type, similar, where you're using an adenovirus as your vehicle rather than, and causing these problems. Well, these people basically do it within a moth cell, not in humans, and then they just take the spikes, they stick them on this lipid nanoparticle, and so that little nanoparticle, which they're all stuck on, and then they inject that. Obviously, on its own, it's not going to work. You need to basically create a reaction as well. So it's like a hormetic effect. So how do they do that? Well, they also create an adjunct. That means they add a thing using this matrix M adjunct technology, which stimulates strong response. So what is it made of? This is the important thing. It's basically it's a 40 nanometer particle based on saponin extract, which is basically a bark extract. And we know this. I mean, in many cases, a lot of us use this. This is actually even used as a hormetic, supplement. You can actually buy this as a supplement to basically use it, and many people do in naturopathic sort of field. They buy this to create a hormetic effect. So that's all it. But at the same time, it can also create a reaction in terms of the immune system. So that's actually combined with cholesterol and phospholipid. So basically, it's, a piece of bark, cholesterol and phospholipid, nothing to worry about. We're talking about things that your body has. Okay, the only part that it doesn't have is the saponin, which is the extract from the bark, which you need a phospholipid. You need basically, I've talked about liposomal. Well, just think of it, this is a 40 nanometer type of liposomal particle that basically they're able to put this saponin inside this sort of phospholipid sort of structure, so it can basically, combined with the actual, these spike proteins, will go in, will create a reaction, and then the body will jump at those proteins, and that's what we want. So that's all we're doing. It's nothing strange and nothing weird about it. A lot of, that's basically the technology. Very much in terms of providing the proteins of the virus in a deactivated way, same thing, and actually put an adjunct. All vaccines have had adjuncts of one sort or another. Some are less safe than others. Let's be honest about that. And I do criticize some companies with some of their methods in terms of the adjunct that they put in their preparation. This one is not a problem because they're actually even using a bloody in some supplements. So a non-bloody issue. Now, let's get to the real crux of the thing. So what is this basically thing that I'm being asked about? Prefusion spike proteins. So technology's been around for a while. What it is what they're doing actually. See all these sort of red things here? This is proline and salt. So you know what proline is? It's an amino acid. That's what it is. So what they're actually doing is they're actually at the receptor site of the actual spikes. What they're doing is the receptor which actually of the spike protein which actually goes to the ACE receptor and connects. What they're doing is they're preventing the connection, which is a good thing. We don't want these spikes going into cells. We want them staying out in the bloodstream so they can be picked up by the immune system. That's one thing. So we get better results, immune response. But the other thing is they actually sit into those receptors. So by having these proline, and it's usually in the Novavax one, there's a double basically at the two sites, like a double proline amino acid, which basically locks the receptor, so it can't connect to the ACE2 receptor. That's all it is. You do consume meat, don't you? Well, it's protein, proline. It's not an issue. It's basically just stuck there to prevent all viruses, all bacteria, everything in your body is made of protein. Okay, get over it. You know, so all we're having here is they've stuck these proline amino acids in order to prevent it connecting to the receptor site. So it stays in the blood system and actually we can get a better immune response and training of the immune system without having to use mRNA technology to replicate quite a few particles so the immune system can see a lot of particles, but that also incorporates in our cells and creates problems potentially in the future. Speculative on our side, but definitely we've seen risks where it's been used in cancer and elsewhere. So let me just stop that. So basically that's all it is. All they're doing is on the spike proteins, they're basically adding two proline amino acids to prevent it from connecting to the ACE2 receptor. Nothing else, nothing controversial, nothing weird and all that. Only a crackpot who's completely ignorant of research science or whatever, or understanding biology or how these spike protein sort of receptors work. You know, it's basically like, you know, you've got a, how can I put it? It's like having a lock and somebody just stuck a whole lot of gunk in your lock so the key won't go in. Well, that proline is you know, those amino acids are like gunk at the receptor site of the spikes, so it can't connect to the ACE2 receptor, which is a fucking good idea, you know? I'm surprised some of the other companies didn't think of that, but they don't give a shit. You know, this is a good method because it basically prevents the actual spikes going into the, you know, and we don't want immune responses inside the cell. Okay, we don't want any activity. We want it happening in the bloodstream. We want the basically to find them, you know, create the immune response and eliminate them, and then basically, you know, create its, you know, basically then a pattern that it knows in the bone marrow where then it can respond. And we know basically from other research that both if you get the disease or you actually get a good immune response, you'll basically have pretty much nearly life protection. But that's pretty much just to cover that point because, you know, a lot of crackpots out there are making a whole lot of assertions about this. you know, because it sounds ominous. Prefusion, it's sort of, you know, it's two fucking amino acids stuck to the receptor site, so it can't actually connect to the ACE2 receptor and go in the cell. Whoopee, God almighty. Anyway, but I suspect they didn't explain it to you like that. They just basically like to fake news and you know, create fear, because, and I suspect this is coming from a lot of the crackpots who are in the actual anti-vax environment primarily. The only thing that I agree with those people are on the mRNA and the AstraZeneca, or the type, you know, the adenovirus type styles. It's not the way we've actually made vaccines in the past. This is where it incorporates in your cells and starts replicating. I don't think that's a good idea to basically be doing that sort of stuff. We know from our own junk DNA that we've got a lot of viruses that have actually incorporated. Now, those past ones that incorporated into our systems, you know, didn't really seem to do a lot of harm to us, but you never know. That's why we don't like taking that sort of risks, and we shouldn't be using this type of technology. It's created issues in the past in the cancer field and other fields, and we shouldn't use those. Novavax is much safer. The other one is sort of Sinovax, which is the Chinese one. That's also pretty much, that's very much more done like the traditional method, where they use the entire virus, not just the spikes, but the entire, all the proteins, but deactivated. And that would have cost them far more money to do. But it's very much similar to the way you do, for instance, the flu vax, much safer. So it's basically a deactivated form of what you would potentially get infected with, and get a normal immune response. So yeah, don't listen to the crackpots out there. There's a lot of garbage out there, unfortunately. And a lot of it's coming from the anti-vax type community. So any vaccine for them is wrong. So they'll make up any shit whatsoever. So it's basically nonsense. It's crap. It's shit. And if they're worried about two, you know, proline amino acids, you know, God, tell them to stop eating meat then. Fucking hell, how crazy can you be? Anyway, it's a non-issue, guys, basically. So, and you know, and the other thing is, your body will basically, you know, all proteins, all viruses, all bacteria are made of protein. Okay, this is just adding two additional proteins. It's not, the immunity won't be against any proteins, amino acids. It doesn't work like that. Otherwise, you know, we would have basically, would react to all animal foods. If that was the case, from the moment we had a virus, from the beginning of time, we would not be able to eat anything which was an animal, any based amino, you know, we wouldn't exist. You know, it's just illogical. So yes, you're not going to get even a reaction of that sort. It's just, what you get a reaction to is the actual characteristics. That means the morphology, the way the shape is of that protein structure. It has a certain way that it actually works in the body. And that basically, like any virus and all that, and that actually works in a certain way, and the immune system will create a certain response to that structure. Okay? It's to the structure, not to the specific aminos. Otherwise, we would be in real trouble, you know? So even if they go, oh, it's going to create a reaction with these aminos, bullshit. Otherwise, we'd have reactivity to meat and all sorts of aminos in our system. Absolute nonsense. You know, proline exists in viruses, bacteria, and all sorts of things. It does not create issues. Okay? All these things are made up of these different amino acids. So that's just bullshit. All it is basically adding two proline amino acids to the receptor site in order to prevent it connecting and going inside the cell, which we don't want it to. You know, that's what the other stuff, the other groups are doing. Okay, we don't want that. We want it to stay just and creating an immune response. That's it. Anyway, I hope that cleared up some of the fucking nonsense out there. And yeah, and just please share and like this video, and share it with your friends, and make sure that they are aware of the nonsense the crackpots are putting out there, and that it is bullshit. Anyway, see you guys.